The Gospel of Mark, chapter 10, verses 1 through 16. And he left there, and went to the region of Judea, and beyond the Jordan, and crowds gathered to him again. And again, as was his custom, he taught them. And Pharisees came up, and in order to test him, asked, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife?" He answered them, "What did Moses command you?" They said, "Moses allowed a man to write a certificate of divorce and to send her away." And Jesus said to them, "Because of your hardness of heart, he wrote you this commandment. But from the beginning of creation, God made them, male and female. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate." And in the house the disciples asked him again about this matter. And he said to them, "Whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery." And they were bringing children to him, that he might touch them, and the disciples rebuked them. But when Jesus saw it, he was indignant, and said to them, "Let the children come to me. Do not hinder them, for to such belongs the kingdom of God. Truly I say to you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God like a child shall not enter it." And he took them in his arms and blessed them, laying his hands on them.
So not too long ago, Disney Plus added a new movie. And it's a movie that has been a youth ministry staple for a really long time, pretty much as long as it's been around. And that movie is The Princess Bride. Now, I hadn't shown my kids this movie before, and so we set that up as a movie night on the Friday that it released, and we watched it together. And the very next day they said, "Hey Dad, could we watch The Princess Bride again?" And I felt like such a proud dad, because I feel like I had parented correctly. They had landed in the right spot, that they were loving this movie that's so important and impactful to so many people, that's been around and has been kind of a big deal. But I don't know if you've seen the movie or not, but there's this one scene that's my favorite scene in the whole thing, and it is a wedding scene. And it's a scene where Buttercup and Prince Humperdinck are getting married, and the priest turns around. He's got this enormous, awesome, crazy hat, and you think it's going to be this beautiful moment, and he just opens up saying, "Marriage. Marriage is what brings us together today." And it just cracks me up. And I'm watching this with my kids, and they see this priest, and my daughter turns to me, she's 7 years old, and she says, "Dad, why don't you have a cool hat like that?" And I didn't really know how to respond, because that's not the kind of pastor I am. But I'm Joe Stroup. I'm the Next Gen pastor at Greystone Presbyterian Church. And I love that scene, mostly because being a pastor, I've done several weddings. In fact, I've done several, like standing right there in this. This is our sanctuary at Greystone. And I wanted to share a little bit about marriage today, because when Jesus teaches about marriage, when he teaches about divorce, when he teaches about kids, like we hear in this passage, this can be kind of a hard passage to hear, because it sounds kind of like Jesus is being tough. It sounds like he's maybe being harder than we would expect, where he's saying that anyone who gets a divorce is committing adultery, that he's condemning this. It seems like he's being a little overly harsh. But the thing that Jesus is really highlighting, the fact that these two stories are right next to each other, I think is really important. The fact that he's highlighting how serious marriage is to go into, how seriously we are to consider the married life, and the value that kids have. See, when Jesus was saying these words, he was speaking in a different cultural time, a time where women didn't have the same rights that they do today, that women were considered more likely to be considered property than as people. And so they had laws to protect people in marriage, to make sure that women could not be used and discarded, to protect them, to make sure that they would be okay, and so that people wouldn't go into marriage flippantly, holding it loosely, but to have a very high picture for what marriage entails. And they'd had some provisions to allow for this. It was still protecting the women, but Jesus was saying, you're missing God's heart. You're missing what God intended, and that in your sin, he's making provisions, but that's not what he designed marriage to look like. That's not why he's giving you this gift of being given to each other in such a powerful way. The fact that he also talks about how valuable children are. When we think about kids, little kids, we think of them as innocents. We think of them as having potential and possibility out in front of them. There's a ton of value in kids. But at the time of Jesus, that wasn't the case. They saw children as sometimes a liability because they ate food, but they couldn't do work the same way an adult could. And so Jesus was actually saying that these children and the perspectives they have, they mattered. And a lot of the way that we think about kids today is because of the way that Jesus taught. What Jesus is giving us a picture is the idea that the kingdom of God that he was coming to bring, it valued things differently than most people saw. Most people look at people even to determine, what can I get from this person? What can you do for me? The relationships that you enter into. What can I get from this? Will this make me feel good? Will this make me happy? Having kids even. Will this be good for me? Or is this just going to be difficult? Jesus was saying that the kingdom that he was bringing in saw people with a different eye. And he was saying the way that God sees people is even with a different eye, the value that he puts on them. When Jesus is talking about marriage and the gift of what it means, I love the way that Ephesians 5 talks about the love between a husband and a wife, how it's a dance of love and respect, and that through all of that, we get a picture about what the love of Jesus is for the church, for the people he calls to follow after him, that his love is sacrificial, that it gives first. And that's the picture of what married love is supposed to communicate and tell. Some of you may not see that picture in the marriages you see around you, in your own families. Some of you, that might seem like a really nice dream, but that's what God's heart is. That's why he gave us the gift of marriage. And when marriages look like the picture that God is calling us to, it's a beautiful give and take. It's a beautiful submitting of yourself to someone else. It's a gift of love. And in it, we learn what it means to trust God. So can you trust God? We see his love demonstrated through Jesus, who sacrificed himself for us. Can we trust him with that innocent trust of a child, turning to their father? Kids, they're generally up for anything. They're quick to respond and quick to trust and quick to go along with. Can we trust the love of God like that? Is that the picture of what it looks like for us to surrender to him, to trust him, to submit to him? My prayer is that that will be true for us. I'll see you all next week.